So nice to meet you. First question is, when did you know you had this gift?
Yeah, thank you for having me. This really started for me when I was actually 10 years old. I had a premonition of my grandmother's death. And at the time, she and I were very close. And I went to bed early one night and just woke up and had this knowingness that my grandmother was going to pass away. And at the time, it really just felt like a memory that hadn't happened yet. It was really hard to understand. And I went to express this to my mom. And as I was telling her, we were interrupted by a phone call. And when she picked up the phone, it was my dad on the other end saying that my grandmother had just died. So that was really the catalyst. But, it took years of these kind of brief moments of knowingness to identify it as an ability.
So is it okay if I ask a little bit of information about, how the information comes through? Do you see anything, or can you hear something talk, or are there more spirits than once talking to you?
I always say the sixth sense uses the other five senses to communicate. So I get impressions, which are really just brief and almost subtle kind of feelings that I have to be able to recognize and then deliver. But I sometimes will get a very strong mental image, kind of like a waking daydream. Other times it'll come through almost as like having a song stuck in my head, but it might be a name. And then there's other times where I'll get physical sensations that correspond with how somebody passed. But I've trained myself to basically kind of open up and identify these impressions as they come through, interpret them in a way that makes sense, and then deliver them in a way that gets validated.
Does it ever come through when you don't want it to? Like, are you passing a stranger in the street and you get this overwhelming feeling? Can you turn it off?
Absolutely. So I liken it more to a volume dial in the sense that, I'm able to kind of turn down the volume when I'm going about my day-to-day life. And then when I go to a reading, I kind of prepare and consciously turn that volume up. But there's times when I'm in public where I have done readings spontaneously, especially when I was younger and kind of identifying my ability. I would test myself and walk up to people. But I've also learned there is a time and a place to share these messages. And so I always prefer that people come to me, with a request for a reading, because I never want to invade somebody's privacy.
I think there's so many of us who've experienced a lot of loss that so badly want to believe, but I know there has to be skeptics out there as well. How do you earn people's trust?
Yeah, I think validation is everything. And I think it's actually important to be skeptically minded. I think it's how we find answers to things. It's how we ask questions, and that leads to answers. But I would say there is a fine line between skepticism and cynicism. And I think I've read a lot of people who did start off as skeptics, and many of which come to these events, which I encourage, because it does allow for an opportunity to see this process in a way that's just unedited, kind of free flowing. And you see that when details come through, like someone's last words or inside jokes, there's certain things that come through that there's no way that could be known through other means. And that's the type of reading I try to give, whether I'm reading a celebrity, an everyday person, it doesn't matter. But I will say non-celebrities are a lot easier to read because there's a lot less about them, which is, helpful for me.
Would you mind sharing who your favorite celebrity is to read?
Oh, in the show, we did over 200 celebrity readings. LaToya Jackson, RuPaul, Boy George was a notable one. It's hard to pick a favorite because they all were really emotional. But I would say my reading with RuPaul was probably one of my favorites.
Wow. It's got to be hard, though, because when you're a celebrity, when you're on TV, you kind of put on this persona. Is it hard to crack through that with the celebrities?
Definitely. There's definitely a conversation around ego, and, these celebrities would come to these readings not knowing what I was going to say. So I think there sometimes was a guardedness that I kind of had to get through, but, everyone left with some takeaway, which I think was valuable. And that was always the goal, but some more than others.
I imagine. Yeah. On your show, Hollywood Medium, there often is a lot of tears during the reading. What does it feel like to be able to connect people with loved ones? Like, I can't even imagine being able to talk to my mom. I mean, I would probably be slobbering, just crying all over you. But I mean, does it feel good to be able to share that closure with folks?
It's honestly a complete privilege. I feel every time I'm in that position that I'm just so honored to be able to connect, and it's humbling. I see these readings and I watch them as a viewer, and it's weird because it doesn't feel like me doing it in the moment. It just feels like I'm just part of the process, experiencing it with the person, and it's just extremely cathartic and humbling. I've always found that important, that this is an ability I was privileged enough to be able to do, and I don't take credit for it. And I think it's just something that I'm lucky enough to be able to share.
Yeah. I lost both of my parents at a relatively young age, and it's something I struggle with all the time, believing that they're still with me in some way, hoping that's the case, but not really true. Is it your belief that our loved ones never really leave us?
Absolutely. And I find that there's a number of ways that they communicate, synchronicity being probably one of the biggest. Synchronicity is basically just a meaningful coincidence. And a lot of people who've gone through the grief process acknowledge these kind of interesting coincidences that they notice that seem to have meaning. And I find that that's one of the greatest ways that they communicate. Equally, sometimes in dreams, if you're one inclined to remember your dreams, sometimes they'll come through that way. Yeah. There's a lot of ways that they communicate. And I think it's just about kind of being the bridge, opening ourselves up to that communication and recognizing it when it happens, because it's important to not, write it off, because these coincidences can be really meaningful.
I have to agree with you. I think that if we're all honest with ourselves, we've had a moment or two where this has happened and we've taken pause. And I guess it is hearing from you validating to know that it's okay to take comfort in that. I really cannot wait to see you in action. And you have 2 upcoming shows in Snoqualmie at Snoqualmie Casino, September 17th and 18th, right? What can people expect at your shows?
Well, it's going to be a 2-part show. So the first part, I basically just share a little bit about myself and really about my ability, which will help lend context to the readings. So in a show, the second portion, I do as many readings as I can. It usually ranges from 10 to 15, and I do as many in the time that I'm allotted. But it's just a great opportunity to see the process unfiltered, unedited, in a way that really is meaningful. And I think even if you don't personally receive a reading at that event, so many people tell me later that they see these readings as they happen to other people and find comfort in the messages that others get. So we all kind of go on that journey together, and it's just really emotional for me even. So I'm very excited.
And if you would like to see Tyler Henry in person, you can still get tickets to the show at the Snoqualmie Casino. There are 2 dates, September 17th and September 18th. You can visit the website on your screen for more info. We also have a link on our website. Snoqualmie Casino attracts top talent all year long. I don't know if you knew that, but there are some big acts coming up this fall, including Everclear on September 3rd, the day after my birthday. I should probably go. And the breakout star of America's Got Talent, Piff the Magic Dragon, brings his fun-sized tour to Snoqualmie Casino on October 2nd. So keep an eye out for all the fun things they have all the time. So first class there. Meantime, coming up on New Day, if you need inspiration for lunch, we have you covered. That's right, we head into the kitchen to whip up a delightful dish. Think shrimp, shallots, and saffron. I can smell it cooking already. Plus, we're going to discuss how you can add to your life by subtracting. Yeah, get this. It's like back to school like you've never seen before. What parents now can do to make the transition smoother when it comes to back to school. So stick around for that.
This portion of New Day Northwest is sponsored by Snoqualmie Casino.